Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and this video is on another little mini web component library I made. Why did I make another one? Because it's interesting to see the different ways you can kind of extend the HTML element class, and there's certain things that I did here that would probably be too much already with everything I have in the MercedUI library. Also things that also just to also have another stripped down library, so that way if you really just wanted the basic features. So in this one I did not include things like the reducer, dispatch. I did include a pseudo global state. I did everything, again, it's just a little bit of a different take on this web component piece. So if you want my grand library with all sorts of bells and whistles, that's the MercedUI library. The link will be in the video description. This is a simplified web component library that should do everything you do need that you would expect to do with components, and a little bit more, but doesn't give you all the extra bells and whistles, the form tool and all that stuff. That way this just has a thing it does. It creates web components. It's called ChainElement. Okay, there are 3 files. They're about around 3-4 kilobytes each. We only need one of them. There's CE, which is basically the way I always do it. There's always a normal version that's just that you can slap in a script tag. There's the module version if you want to do ES6 modules, which is what we're going to do in this video. And then there's the NPM version. So if you actually install the project via NPM, you can use that version with your favorite bundler. And all the install rules are now here, so you can see how to do it each different way. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the ES6 module. Okay, but because of CORS issues, I'm not going to use the link. I'm going to just copy that over, but we want to save the file. So let's see here. I want to save the module file. So I'm just going to hit save link as. And I am going to save it here in the folder I have the file we're going to be working out of. Yeah. So here's CE mod. So you can just save that file. That's all you need, that one file. Okay, now let me just delete all this. Well, just close all this stuff. Too many things open. And that's going to be in here. So there it is, CE mod. So we go to our index.html file. Now I have the milligram CSS library here, just because it's a great thing to slap on just to get some nice aesthetics. What I like about it is I don't have to use any classes. It just automatically styles all my tags. So I don't have to think about it. So if I'm just doing an exercise like this, it just gives me a little bit of aesthetics to show you what we're doing. But in this case, you only need one script tag to your actual JavaScript file. And the only difference is that from your normal script tag is that you're going to be putting in the type module as a property. That's how the browser knows that you're going to be using ES6 modules, which the only reason you wouldn't want to use ES6 modules is because older browsers probably don't support it, which really means people who still use Internet Explorer. Okay, one moment. I hear some sirens living on a busy Brooklyn corner, so I'm going to pause this for a moment. Okay, so now that we have that script tag in there, we can go to our app.js, and here's where you'd actually bring in the library. So here's where you would use that import command. You might be familiar with if you use like create React app or stuff like that. You know, a lot of the bundlers allow you to use this syntax through npm, and then the bundler will just transpile it for you. But basically the way it works, the way this reads, and what I want to do is I'm going to get rid of this. So it's like that. You could do a URL and it'll pull from it. The problem is where I have it hosted, there's CORS issues when you try to do a module. So it's just easier to download the file. Okay, import ChainElement. There's only really one thing this exports. That's what makes this library a lot simpler than MercedUI, where there's a lot of things that it's importing and that you can bring in and use, like MercedElement, everything here is all packed into this one class, ChainElement. Okay, So basically, you just have to learn how to use this one class really well, and you can really get the juice out of this library. ChainElement, and we're getting it from that. And again, as you can see here in the source code. Okay. What happened here? Oh, GitHub changed all of it. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to get it from GitHub. Delete. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to go over here. Instead of just grabbing it from like these GitHub links, I'm going to use this link over here. So I'm actually going to go to the page, which is fine in the browser, so we can see the source code. I'll just take you to the file, and then you see all that, and we just want to save this. Save as. Goody. Much better. So now if I look at the source code, which is the way I wrote it, you will see, I mean, there's these two support functions. I do not export them, so if you were looking to use get query hash or capture props, then you might want to use the MercedUI library or come in here and actually add the export. Again, I was just trying to keep this simple. I am using these functions in the class, which is why they are there. Okay, ChainElement. So again, see, I put this export keyword, which then exports it, which means I can bring it in here. Okay, just kind of explain you how that all connects in case you want to go in there and add stuff or alter stuff. Okay, so there we go. We have the the ChainElement, and this basically, if you've seen any of the other class ways of creating web components, this works very similarly. So you're just going to create a new class. So class, we're going to call this test as I usually do, which is because our test component, and has to extend ChainElement. Okay, I built in a lot under the hood under ChainElement, so you'd have to do very little in creating it. Okay, and then there's a couple different things I did differently than I've done in the past in the MercedUI library. So you still got to make sure we bring in our constructor. The only thing you really have to do here is you bring in super, and then here's where you would define your initial state. So you just pass in your initial state into the super. And again, if you're not familiar with what super does, super calls the parent constructor. So we're defining the constructor for test, but I need you to use the constructor for ChainElement to invoke it, so that way I can do the thing. So the only parameter that my parent constructor takes is the state. Okay, so you just pass in the state. I'm going to just keep it an empty object for the moment, and then that's done. Okay, that's all you need to do with the constructor. The parent constructor does the rest for you. It's going to go grab your props. It's going to go do your initial render. It's going to do everything for you. Just don't have to worry about it. And instead of passing in your builder in the constructor, you just override it. So you would just do builder here. Now the builder is the function that's going to return your template string. So it's going to basically, it builds your component. It builds like what the HTML is via strings. And what you're going to do is it takes 4 arguments, and it's always the state first. So whatever the state for this component is at that time will be passed in. The props, whatever the props when you put in the HTML tag gets passed in, and then there's storage. Storage is a global store that ChainElement has. So there's this object that's on ChainElement, the class, that you can just add information to, and it's always going to be available to your builder for every class that you make. So think of it as just like a global place to store information, but it's not really a global state. That's why I didn't call it a global state like I did in other versions, because when you can just update this object directly, but it won't automatically trigger a re-render of any components. Okay, so keep that in mind. So you can use the information there, but just changing it won't change your component. You have to trigger a re-render somewhere else, which you can either do it by updating the state, or there's a way to trigger a re-render of all your components, which I'll show you in a bit. Storage, and then query. And then the query is just literally if there's any URL queries, they will be made available to you in your builder, so you can use them. Okay? So here's what I am going to do. For the way I like to build my, and you can literally build this any way you want. How your builder function returns a string is up to you, so you can put all sorts of fun logic here. I always like to split it up into 2 pieces, creating a variable called style that has all my styles. Okay, and basically that just is a string with style tags. And I'll define all my styles there. And then const my template, which equals, you know, whatever I want to put in here. And I'll just start it with a div just to keep it simple. Okay. And then I return, and I'm using backticks for interpolation. I always use backticks for everything nowadays. Although here I used single quotes, so I want to change that because I'm going to use interpolation. Okay. And then here I just do this. I use interpolation to interpolate both style, then the template. And there's my component builder. Nice. Okay, right now it doesn't do anything, so let's do something. So in that div, we're going to add an h1 that says hello world. Okay, let's break this up a little bit so it looks nicer. There we go. And that should do it. This component should be working. Okay, so now well, actually one more step. So this component should be working. I can actually just generate it as a class and do stuff with it. But the benefit of web components is I can use them as HTML tags. So to do that, I do need to actually register it with the DOM. So ChainElement, built into it, kind of like MercedElement, has make tag, which works the same way. I name the tag. So test has to have a kebab, which means it has to have a dash somewhere in the middle. That's just the way web components work. Okay, the reason for that is so that way it avoids ever accidentally naming something the same as an existing HTML element. It's not possible because there is no HTML elements with dashes in them. So, you know, usually best thing to do is kind of come up with some sort of prefix for your set of components, and then use the same prefix with the name afterwards. Cool. So that's that, and then the component, that name we want to attach to test, the class we just defined. Cool, and that defines the component. The component's ready to go. So let's go back to our index.html. Let's do it, test slash test. Okay, save. Now, since we're using ES6 modules, I can't just load up the file in the browser. I have to run a web server for it to like do the module thing. So I have Light Server installed. Makes life real easy. I recommend it. You can just do it like npm i-g light server. One moment. Okie dokie. And that would install Light Server globally on your system. I already have it installed globally. So what I'm going to do is just run Light Server. And what it does, it just runs a server in your folder. So whatever folder you're in, and that'll just feed right off the index.html. And there we go. Hello world. Okay, let me think about that. Why is that? Oh, what did I do over here? I didn't define any styles. What folder was I in? Just kill that server. I think I might have been in the wrong folder. Yeah, I was in the wrong folder. I want to be in CDUI prac. Now let's do Light Server. Okay, kickstarts the server, opens it up. Okay, and then there's hello world. Right now it has no style. Okay, I could style it real quick. I could just be like h1 color. Now I'm going to take advantage of that query URL. So here's what I'm going to do. Color. And then I'm going to use interpolation to do this. If there's a query.color property, so if it exists, then I want to set it to the query.color property. If not, just set it to blue. Okay. Man, be in Brooklyn during these times. One moment. Sorry for all the sirens. I live on a busy Brooklyn corner by a hospital, so especially during these days, early 2020, you are seeing a lot of traffic to the hospital. But anyways, okay, so basically the way this works, if there's a query for color, it'll use that value. If not, then it'll just be blue. So right now there is no URL query, so it's just blue. But if I did create one, so I go here and I do color equals red, that didn't quite work the way I wanted it. Let's see here, where did I go wrong with that? Did I save it? Query.color. Let's do this. Always the good way to always check is do console.log query. So make sure that the query stuff is showing up just fine. And let's go take a look at our inspector. There's our object. Okay. And is that not being passed in right? It's your chain. Because you can access that object by also by going to ChainElement.query. This would get you to that same spot. Same. It is not grabbing the query, so I'll have to fix that. It will be fixed. Oh, it was working. I just didn't hit enter. So I put in the URL, I just didn't hit enter, I hit refresh. So it was refreshing the old URL without the query. So yes, no, it's working fine. Okay, so here we go. So you can see like I console log the query object, there it is. And again, I can change this to whatever I want. I can be like green. It changes the color of the green. So you have access to that if you want. Okay, so you can give people the ability to like skin your components through queries if you want to. The only thing is you do want to like do those ternary operators in case the query is not in the URL. It doesn't try to access properties that don't exist, so keep that in mind. This is the wrong file. Cool, and let me just get rid of this. Console log. So that is working. Cool. And let's try putting something in the storage object. So you can see, again, I'm working, so we know that the query object works. Let's see what the storage thing does. Again, that's sort of the global storage. The way you add stuff to that is you just do ChainElement.storage, and then let's add something called size for font size, and it will equal 50 pix. Okay, save. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my style here. Let's see where the color style end. Okay, color, and that ends here. So let's put a semicolon for that one, and then I want to do font size. And for font size, we're going to use storage dot of size, because that's what I called it, size. So storage dot size, because I'm passing in the storage object to your function. So save. Okay. And then let's see here. Hello world is bigger. Okay. So it works. And just so you can see both of them, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to console log all the parameters. This is always a good way to know what you're working with. State, props, storage, query. That way you can see the first two should be undefined. So you see the first two are empty objects because there is no state that we've passed in. There is no props on the URL, but we do have something in the global storage on the class, and we do have something in the color green. Now one thing I haven't tried out yet is that since I define a sort of a storage property on the ChainElement class that's static, does test get its own? So let's find that out. I haven't tried this yet. So let's see here, test dot storage. dot hello equals hello. I mean, I guess that would assign it either way, so it's just going to exist. Let's do this. If I were to do go back to my query here, and if I were just to add to my console logs test dot storage, does an empty object get console logged? That's separate, or is it the same object? Let's see here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Nope. Okay, they're all sharing the same object. Now we know. Okay, so basically it's just one giant global object between all of them. Anything that's derived from ChainElement. Cool. That's good to know. Save. Okie dokie. Now let's use props. So let's go to our HTML, put in a property. Let's just call it user, and we'll just say Joe. Okay, there's our property. Save. See, now we can see that that property Joe, user Joe, is already available to us. Nice. And now I can go use it in my builder. Again, all I'm doing is just building up this build function. Okay, I'm going to say hello. Instead of saying hello world, we'll say hello props.user. Okay, save. And now it says hello Joe. So now if I were to do that same component a few times, Bob, Steve, hello Bob, hello Steve. It works. Okay, now for state. Okay, so we're going to do an initial state, so I need to go back to my app.js, and we're going to add a property to our state called hello. So that's in our super, we define that. So hello. So this will be a hello property, and that hello property will start off as hello. Okay, save. Well, actually, then we're going to do is we're going to use that over here. So instead of hello being hard-coded, we will have it as state.hello. Okay, so it should still say hello to whoever, except now it's grabbing it from the state, and we can see the state has a property called hello now. Again, our props has Joe, our global storage thing has 50 pixels in it, and we have our query here green. They're making use of all these things. They have a very dynamic component, which is cool. Okay, so I mean, theoretically, you could actually just have people query their color schemes to their URLs or something like that. Well, let me see here. What do I want to do next? Oh, we want to make something where we change the state. So let's make a button. Click me /button. Okay. So we want to change the state. Okay, so here we can. Now the thing is that I have to grab that property somehow. I have to grab that test. So what I'm going to do is I want to change the Bob one, only the Bob one. So I'm going to give that one an ID of Bob. Okay, and then what I can do is I need to define an onClick function, and what happens on click. Okay, as an abbreviation, we have instead of you doing like document.getElementById, you can just do ChainElement.doc, meaning short for document, and instead of getElementById is by ID. Okay, so I'm going to get it by ID, and I'm going to get Bob, and then every element has its setState function. Okay, every component has its set state function, and there I can change the state to something else. So say change it to hello to, and then since I'm using double quotes to define the on-click event, I have to use single quotes inside of it. So hello, instead it'll be bonjour. Save. I mean, again, I could make this simpler by assigning this to a variable and whatnot, but just things. Okay, so now there's that button. Click me. Now if I click this, it should change this to bonjour Bob. But it did not. Chain element is not defined. But it is. Oh, that's right, because it's a module. So this is not defined here. So I gotta go back. So let's just redo this a little bit differently. So we're gonna do this here. We're gonna create a variable. My app.js variables will be available. Const const bob equals, so we're just gonna do the same thing. Chain element dot doc dot by ID, and then we're gonna get the one with the ID named Bob. Save. And then we go back to my index here, and what I'm going to want to do is just change this to Bob, and then we're going to use that Bob variable set state function. Just make sure that I saved it in the right variable. Well, it's with an uppercase B. Bob dot set state. Nope. I want to save. Now let's refresh. On-current Bob is not defined. HTML button element on click. Let me look at the docs. I might be doing this wrong. ChainElement.doc by ID. No, that's right. But it's not complaining about the function. Bob is not defined. That's in our app.js. So let's try just defining a function. Const submit equals okay, well, we're just going to sit there and here say chain element dot doc dot by ID Bob dot set state hello property will be changed to bonjour. And that needs to be a string. Save that. Just go back to my index.html here. Change this on click to submit. Save. Refresh that. Submit is not defined. Interesting. This must be an aspect of using modules that I'm not familiar with. So let me just do a quick lookup. Okay, so yeah, so since we're using modules, we're going to have to do this a slightly different way. There's only one button, so this is not going to be too crazy. So we'll just leave that button there for a moment, but the actual event we have to define back in the app.js and attach it there. So we've already defined the function, what the function does, so that's done. Now we just have to do like chain element dot doc dot, we'll use select because it's basically the same thing as query selector. Select, and we're going to go select the button, and then we're going to add an event listener to that button. And basically we're going to add it as a click listener, and what's going to happen, we're going to use the submit function. Okay, and And that should get us where we need to be. So let's try. Yay, works. Okay. So you just have to add your event listeners in the JavaScript if you're using modules. If you're using the script tag and you're using it like a CDN, then you can do it the old-fashioned way. Cool. So bonjour, Bob. And again, so basically what's happening is I click the button, it changes the state for Bob and re-renders Bob. Cool. Now, let's add another word to our storage. Okay, ChainElement.storage.day. And we're just going to say here, it's a good day. Save. Okay, it's a good day. Now, what I'm going to do is we're going to interpolate that to here. Storage dot day, because that's part of the storage object. That's part of our global storage here. So now when I look at this, it's going to say, hello, Joe, it's a good day. Hello, Bob, it's a good day. Hello, Steve, it's a good day. Now let's change the button. So instead of the button submitting and changing the state, what it's going to do, it's going to change that property. ChainElement.storage.day is going to now become it is a bad day. Okay, save. Now what I'm going to do is right after that, I'm going to console.log ChainElement.storage. So that way we can see that the storage does change. So now if I click the button, see now it says it is a bad day, but notice this does not re-render. So again, this was the point I was trying to make earlier. When you use the global storage, if you change the global storage, it's not state, so it will not cause a re-render of the components. Okay, but now, especially if the storage is affecting a lot of components, going back and then trying to trigger an individual render of all those components can be a little bit frustrating. How would you do that? There is a build function, and you could just run the, so you just choose that component, hit .build, and it'll automatically re-render its builder function or rerun its builder function. But there's a better way. You can just do ChainElement.build all. And what this does is just going to automatically force any element that is derived from ChainElement, so any components you've made through ChainElement will then get, that have every instance of them will then be re-rendered. Okay, so this can, not something I would use all the time if you don't have to. Like if you really only need one or two components to be re-rendered, you know, what you can do is you can just create, or a family of components to be re-rendered. You might want to create some other function that will call the build function individually on them. So I'll show you that. I'll show you that as well. But this will, because basically what happens every time you create an instance, it gets added to that an array called a property of ChainElement called list. So it's constantly keeping track of every instance of everything you create from ChainElement. So that way you can re-render them if you need to. So now I hit refresh. Now if I click this, list is not defined. Ooh, let me examine. Okay, that did require a quick fix on my part. So by the time you watch this, that'll have already been fixed in the library itself, so no worries. But see, I click that and it re-renders all of them. Okay, so it updates the object and then just recalls the builder for each one. Okay, which is nice, because that way I can take advantage of that global thing and then trigger that re-rendering whenever I want. I didn't want to make it automatic after re-render all of them, because in MercedUI I gave you the flexibility of choosing sort of what gets registered with the global state, and that's why I called it state in that situation, because when you there was a way if you changed it, it automatically renders those that you registered. But I wanted to make this simpler, so it just automatically keeps track of all your components. If you need to re-render all of them, you can call the build all function, but you can just add whatever you want to that storage property. So this is why I kind of made this a separate library, because there's certain functionality that is actually fundamentally different than the MercedElement class in the MercedUI library. So in that case, if you did want to create families of components, your best bet is just to create a function that will recall their build. So you would do something like this, like let's say we only wanted to call those first two. Let me give those both an ID. So this will be ID Bob, this will be ID Joe. Save. What I would do is I just create like render. I'll call this. Oh no, I'm finding this in the wrong spot. Here we go. Where do I want to do this? Right over here. So we'll call this const render Bob Joe. Okay, equals, not going to pass anything in, it's just a quick support function. And we'll just say, hey, ChainElement dot doc dot by ID. No, wait, did I do it lowercase or uppercase? Joe and Bob. Joe. Okay, and then I'll just manually call this build function, so that way it just rebuilds the component. And then I'll just do the same thing again. There's different ways you can do this. Do the same thing for Bob, and now it'll only call for those two. So instead of calling the build all function, I will call render Bob and Joe, and now it'll only automatically update those first two. Chain element is not defined. Oh, I put a $sign. My bad. Oh, the sirens. Cool. So that's saved. And then I click this. I say only the first two get updated because I created a custom function to manually call that build function on those two to build those two. That would automatically happen if I were to use setState. Again, setState will update the state and then go call that build function, so that way you don't have to. And giving you that nice, smooth re-rendering feel. But yeah, that's pretty much the extent of the library. Everything is in the documentation. Okay, so everything you need is in here. But yeah, with that you can create lots of components pretty quickly, pretty easily, without a whole lot of stress. With some neat features. And again, having access to that storage and query gives you just a little extra power when it comes to designing how you're going to template it out, and things you have to leverage. So my name is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. Have a great day. This is the ChainElement library. Links are in the video description. Have a great day and enjoy.